Salvete omnes! In this lesson, you will be introduced to Latin nouns. Before watching this video lesson, please read pages 19 through 23 and 418 through 425 in your textbook. This lesson will cover the following topics: a review of word order and inflection, nominative, accusative, and vocative cases and their uses, how to form the first and second declension nominative, accusative, and vocative nouns, translation practice, how to build vocabulary when it comes to nouns, and finally, how to parse nouns. In the last video lesson, we learned what it means for a language to be inflected. That is, the relationships between words and the function each word serves in the sentence depend on the form of the word, morphology, rather than word order. Let's return to our example sentence. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dogs. How do we know that fox is the subject of the sentence? Word order, you guessed it. Fox is the first noun in the sentence and immediately precedes the verb jumped, so we know it is the subject. The other noun in the sentence, dogs, follows a preposition, over, so we know it is the object of that preposition. If you were to rearrange these nouns, the sentence would change entirely in meaning. Nouns in Latin, like verbs, have different forms based on the function they serve in the sentence. These are called cases. In Latin, there are 7 cases. Today we will learn 3 of those 7: nominative, accusative, and vocative. The nominative case expresses the subject of a finite verb. We only know finite verbs, so don't worry about that distinction right now. One way to remember the function of the nominative case is that nominative comes from the Latin word nomen, which means name. So, nominative nouns name the subject. Remember from the last video lesson that Latin sentences usually place their subjects at the beginning of the sentence, so you can expect to see nominative nouns at the beginning of many Latin sentences. The accusative case is most often used to express the direct object of a transitive verb. Transitive just means that it takes an object. Verbs that make sense without objects, like dance or run, are considered intransitive. Unfortunately, the etymology of the accusative case is complicated and does not offer any helpful mnemonic devices. Remember from the last video lesson that Latin sentences usually place objects in between the subject and verb, so you can expect to see accusative direct objects between nominative subjects and their verbs. The vocative case is used for expressions of direct address. Vocative comes from the Latin verb voco vocare, which means to call or summon. So we call on people with the vocative case. The vocative case is often set off by commas and is almost always clear from context. Now that we have a general understanding of these 3 cases, let's learn some case endings. Just like verbs are grouped into conjugations based on their thematic vowels, nouns are organized into groups called declensions based on their thematic vowels. There are 5 declension groups in Latin. Today we will learn the nominative, accusative, and vocative case endings for the first and second declensions. Our example verbum for the first declension will be puella, girl. Nominative singular, puella. Accusative singular, puellam. Vocative singular, puella. Nominative plural, puellae. Accusative plural, puellas. Vocative plural, puellae. Remember that whenever we learn a new paradigm, I will always ask you about patterns. So, what patterns do you notice? Like verbs, nouns can be divided into 2 parts: stems, in this case puel, and endings. You may also notice that all the endings start with the letter A, which is the thematic vowel for the first declension. Finally, the nominative and vocative case endings for the first declension are the same, which means fewer items to memorize. Now let's take a look at the second declension and compare it to the first declension. Our example verbum for the second declension will be amicus, friend. Nominative singular, amicus. Accusative singular, amicum. Vocative singular, amice. Nominative plural, amici. Accusative plural, amicos. Vocative plural, amici. Do you notice any patterns across these two declensions? If you can't discern the second declension's thematic vowel, that's okay. It will become more apparent when we learn the rest of the second declension case endings. You may notice, however, that both accusative singular endings end with the letter M, and both accusative plural endings end with the letter S. Additionally, the vocative plural endings of the second declension are identical, just as they are in the first declension. A few words before we put this all into practice. If you are unfamiliar with the vocabulary for chapters 1 and 2, you may want to have them readily available for this portion of the video. Additionally, by now you may have noticed that Latin does not include definite articles, the in English, or indefinite articles, a or an in English. This means that it is up to you to supply them when translating Latin into English based on context. Agricola equum ducit. How would you translate this sentence? Agricola is our only noun in the nominative case, so it must be the subject. Likewise, equum is our only noun in the accusative case, so it is probably a direct object. Put those together with the verb ducit, which is present active indicative, and what do you get? A farmer leads a horse, the farmer leads the horse, a farmer leads the horse, the farmer leads a horse. All options are correct. Remember that the present tense also offers some variation in translation. So if you translated ducit as is leading or does lead, that is also correct. Let's try another one. Petitus na Deus. How would you translate this sentence? Remember, Latin sentences will not always have expressed subjects. In these cases, it is important to be able to recognize the person and number of the verb's subject based on the verb's ending. Petitus is a second-person plural, so the subject is you plural, you all, or my personal favorite, y'all. Ne is attached to the verb, so we know it is a yes or no question. In this case, word order won't help you determine what function Deus is serving. Instead, you have to know that Deus is accusative plural, which means that it is probably the direct object. Put it all together, and what do you get? Do y'all seek the gods? Are y'all seeking the gods? Before we end, a few miscellaneous items. First, as is my general preference, I want you to begin accumulating vocabulary the right way from the beginning, so you don't have to go back and relearn it all. In the last video, we learned that a word's dictionary form is called a lemma, and that a lemma will contain a standard set of information depending on the word's part of speech. A noun's lemma will contain 3 pieces of information: its nominative singular form, its genitive singular form, and its grammatical gender. For example, the lemma for puella is puella, puellae, feminine, often abbreviated F period. We will learn the genitive case and grammatical gender soon. For now, just make sure you include this information when you create your Chapter 2 vocabulary study materials. Second, just like we can analyze the morphology of verbs to identify their component attributes, we can also parse nouns. The 3 component attributes of a noun are its gender, number, and case, which is another reason to include gender in your study materials so you can practice parsing correctly from the beginning. Say it with me. Gender, number, case. Gender, number, case. Internalize this. I don't know how to end this video, so I'll keep it simple. Waleta!